Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, and in the morning it is. This is Llorraine Neithardt, your host of Venus Unplugged. I was just looking out the window, and it's so gorgeous. The snow is astounding. And I usually do the show at 9 a.m. in the morning, but since I'm up and about and spent an exquisite day reading love letters, I thought, wow, let's talk about love letters. Love letters as an art form. You know, we don't usually write love letters anymore. But I was reading about the love affair between George Sand and, she had several, and she could have written many volumes of love letters, but particularly between Alfred de Musset and George Sand. And to sit in the quiet when the snow has calmed everything down, and it was completely and utterly surreal. And to feel what two, brilliant people in different ways had to write to one another, and really what was that art form? Now, I couldn't imagine what would happen to George Sand if she got, an emo, if we took, anybody who's in love or falling out of love or breaking up or doing whatever they're doing, all the different stages of love, and just put all their texts together. That would be an interesting run-on sentence. That would be pretty amazing. I don't know if anybody would know what anybody was talking about. So, as far as the love letter, that these letters, in a sense, at that period of time, 1820, it was a form of adultery, that you could have these adulterous relationships. And often between these great lovers, sometimes they never met, or they met only once, or I guess in a way like Dante, he only saw his beloved Beatrice once in Venice as a young girl walking across a bridge. So this kind of evocation of the beloved, or the demon lover, or the one who will bring us our greatest joys and ecstasies. This art form, the affair through the written word. And when you're reading these, you can tell, whoa, this is not going to end well. And the brilliance, whether it be the sarcasm or whatever the dance was, it's like a flamenco dance with words and letters and nuances. So it's, letter writing was once considered a dangerous pastime. It probably still is for some. And it was totally related to seduction. So one had to be very careful how you addressed whoever you were writing a letter to. But, I'm looking more at the love affair. And just the whole, and I thought, wow, once the males, who were carrying letters, were filled with, like the wings of Venus, were filling the air, whether it was the butler or the manservant or the letter carrier, or the secret friend or the best friend, all this kind of espionage of love in the house of love to deliver. Not just the writing of it, the whole feeling of what was going on, the nightmare of star-crossed lovers and letters crossing over and nobody getting that. And that is one good point about telephones and all that kind of stuff, but that can still happen. Venus or Hermes can be such a little trickster in all things. So this sense that what we've lost we certainly can get in touch with it again by reading books and love affairs and of written letters, right? But it's also, I think it can be a way. I mean, what started this whole thing was I'm going to be taking. I mean, I've always written, but now I'm going to be taking a creative writing course at the Irish Art Center in New York, in Hell's Kitchen. And I thought, well, I mean, I've got literally thousands of books that I've read, but I thought, no, I need to surround myself with great literature. So I took a bunch of books out, and I'd read most of them, but I had forgotten all about these books of love letters, right? I thought, well, let me start with that. Let this become my psychic friends, my lovers and my foes, my remembrances, my where we can see, Venus at her best with one of her bards, and how she, through the word, through Hermes, can move and create. And how does that happen? Because there's a vulnerability, at least in the great works of letter writing. And I don't know if they meant for them to be published, but they certainly they did. So there's this sex appeal about letters. And there's also this ritual, about letters, the waiting for the return and the anticipatory anxiety, just the sheer madness or the out of your mind and, craziness. But if one can hold their state of Venus, that the expectation, kind of pregnant with possibilities, and that mystery. They obviously had a lot more time than we have, or at least they related to time differently. I don't know that they had more time, but just all of this ritualistic, artistic, and it's the same thing happens when you're going to create. You wait and, you swear, oh, my God, I don't have anything. I'm empty, and that's always the best place to be. Because in that emptiness, whatever comes forth, is not you. It just kind of like mugged you when you go for it. So, and the same thing happens in this capacity to communicate. They're like winged thoughts. And it's somewhat of a form of prayer. The beseeching. And as you read these letters, you're with it. It's like, you think you just went a little too far with that one. That was a little cunning, And then there's all the zhuzh and all, and you see you see actually the stages of alchemy, and then that Negredo starts coming in, or that kind of let's rip at one another, and then the jealousies that come in, or the nuances that come in, or it's a wonderful, wonderful way to also, get in touch with aspects of yourself. You can write letters to yourself and different parts of yourself, to the beloved within, to the unloved within, to the child, to the dead beloved. There's no reason why this letter writing as an art form, it doesn't have to be to another person, although it would be lovely. Or if one started kind of certainly wouldn't be Facebook, but something where you would have letter writing to one another, and you could just express, and it doesn't have to be. One can play a role. One can move in and move out, right? And so this how love can be a fief in this written word, or the ritual of this coming in, the papers we picked, how it's stamped, the stamps we use, I do that. I have certain stamps for certain letters, because it kind of works with it. But, I used to be a designer. Well, I guess I never stopped being a designer. I was a couture designer. And lovers, as lovers, we have no patience. And we don't know how to hide. And I think in the letter writing, that we can learn some patience. We have time for the reflection. We have time for the written word. We have, but once it's sent out, then we're in a state of mystery, and we're in a state of magic. How will it be received? When will it be received? Will the wrong person open it? All the dangers. So the deceptions, and the deceptions can be very, very funny. Okay, the deceptions could be real. One person really doesn't care. Or the other person is trying to make more of it, and they're stepping away. It's kind of like the tango, stepping forward and stepping away. Or it can be this when it turns into spite, or it turns into that misunderstanding. And what lives on the page, we've lost that connection. So in the craving to not just, my mother used to say, you want to read this really great love story? I said, no, I want to live a great love story. I don't want to read about it. Okay, but here I am reading about it. And I've had good opportunities to live it out, too. And so the letter was the important medium, especially when it was written in French. I mean, they were made for that letter writing. Or it can be a vehicle of doom. What is going to happen? What will take place? So in this, it's risk-taking. And it's also great reading and great history. So it allows the love affair in terms of as a work of art, kind of pull back a little bit and say, okay, so, sometimes, would the love affair be a tragedy or a comedy? It's usually what the modern experience of love is about. But if your state of love, whether there's an object of that love, or, it can be one's children, it can be animals, it could be your shoes, whatever that might be, if one really took the time, that would be hilarious. Writing thank you letters to your shoes. I'd definitely write some serious thank you notes to my pots, because God knows I can't do it, but they can cook some seriously fabulous things. But removing ourselves from the modern just texts and emos, and I'm sure they have some meaning, but I don't think a lot of people are going to reflect on an email. You just don't think it's going to happen. There's it's called the Storymatic. And here it is. I got it at Museum of Art and Design. 6 trillion stories in one little box. So what this basically is, I guess it's an evocation, right? So they on one side they've got a couple of hundred kind of descriptions, right? And then on the words, and then you take these and you start putting these sentences, like I just pulled wrong side of the tracks, and a person can't wait any longer. So then you begin to write a story about that, or you write a paragraph about that. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be marvelous to just write a series of words or sentences or quotes, and then write a paragraph or write a love letter to an unknown part of yourself, or to the secret love within. Hey, it's leap year. Sadie Hawkins. We can ask anybody to marry us if we want, but most of all, marrying ourselves. So there's this marvelous, it's called Storymatic, and it's really great fun, and it's also great as a game. People can just at a dinner party sometimes I just have people pick some of these cards, and then we see what we're going to come up with. So, and it's hilarious. And it's certainly better than telephone, because at least you've got the card in front of you and know what you keep track of what you're supposed to be saying. But if we had a box like this of just different words of love and vex and hatred and rage and all those wild passions and the gods and all of that, and we can put them all in the back and just pick them up and said, okay, I'm just going to go for it. I am going to write a love letter. It can be a forbidden love letter, or the love letter you've wanted to receive. It's an incredible art form that we must begin to remember. It's like they say, like in the letters, beware of the flatterer. He feeds you with an empty spoon. So there are people who can flatter in love letters, but they don't really mean it. Or they belabor. It's like, what are you saying? And then you've got to calm down and feel that person and get a sense of who that person is and how they could possibly say it. It's a completely different form of becoming aware of the dynamics and love as word. One of the great quotes of George Sanders that she said, I put up with life, she wrote, because I love it. Now there's a T-shirt worthy of having. I put up with life because I love it. That's a glorious, glorious attitude to have. So, being able to look at what happens if we wrote, or, to our family, to our sisters, to our brothers, to unknown parts of ourselves, families. Actually, there was I think it was something, love letter or something. And it was this really great idea. And what you would do, you'd sign up on this website, and they would send you the name of a person. They would tell you what their kind of storyline was. It could be somebody who's just is in the service and nobody's writing to them, or somebody who's just lost their parent or something, and you would write a little note of encouragement, and suddenly out of nowhere, this person who didn't have one friend in the world gets 25 letters from strangers. It was a brilliant idea. Or write a love letter and leave it somewhere. Just to a stranger, or to whoever has to pick it up. Meaningful coincidences, allowing that to happen. Using that relationship that happens between the word and the heart. That is there just because that's the nature of the poetry of the heart. That's the most important part, the letter writing can still be kind of dangerous in an interesting way. Or the old saying, tell the truth and shame the devil, how dangerous that can be. But there was Also, in etiquette, there was a kind of an unspoken form. You didn't go ballistic, although that I'm sure did happen. And when they did go ballistic, it was in such a civilized and killing manner. It was like a poison gas when George Sand was upset. And whatever he would say, she would counter it with sheer brilliance. But she stayed on point. And the amazing thing was, like, through these letters back and forth, they stayed connected. Even though they were going, and some of them they were really going at one another, was like, wow, look at this. Right? And you could really hear and feel the difference between the male and the female, or the poet and the musician, or the, where they were coming from, what was it about. And it wasn't analyzing what happens to them in childhood. They were right in the state, in the moment, in the presence, in exactly what was happening. And that's the beauty of sitting and reading these love letters, because it takes you right back to being present with them, present between the relationship. I suppose somewhat kind of an erotic voyeur. There's a voyeurism. There's a, oh my God, I can't believe they just said that. I wonder what she's going to say right now. This kind of this fabulous sex appeal that begins to happen in the intimate world, and the time it takes to think. Usually people who are going to write letters, they tend to be more introverted and certainly reflective. Unless you just spurt everything out, which I don't think is this. Then it winds up being a lawsuit, not a love letter. So and like I said, the rituals where you can tear up a letter, or you can burn it because you don't want anybody to find it, or you hold it in a secret place and somebody finds it 200 years later, and it's so powerful. Or it can be light and airy, or descriptive of the moment, and or certainly. Actually, now that I think about it, I'll feel my way through it. It's very much like a living dream. The way it begins, where it starts and then it builds, and then what the end is, and then you're reading between the lines. Sometimes it's a lot of lines to figure out, but that you have that in you. So instead of just sitting down and writing a list of things you got to do for the day, write a love letter. Or, in the family matrix, have everybody write a love letter to one another. To something sincere. Something from the heart. The way children can write with such brutal wisdom. It just cuts right through to what's really happening. So again, it's not the analytical; it is the dance. So, and there's times when you're writing a letter, and very often, I'm just going to use the example of the woman. It's not always the woman, but she doesn't want to end the letter because she's afraid in ending the letter, that is the beginning of the end of the relationship. And a little bit in the modern world, too, where, someone doesn't text back right away. It's like I didn't text back. There wasn't anything to text. What was the answer to that? How many different ways do you say yes or no? And yet there's that longing, and maybe that's part of that neurotic longing that happens in the texting. There's no struggle with the affair. You don't even know if there's an affair. It doesn't have all this prayer in it and ritual in it. I think it's a very, very important part of the Venusian life, how we can experience so many different ways to describe what is going on, or also to be coquettish or to be secretive and yet give enough hints. And it's like the language of flowers. You know, in Victorian times, if you got a big bouquet of flowers, somebody wasn't just sending you flowers. There was a message in those flowers. Each flower meant something. You know, like violets, like meet me at 4, or you know, just it's once again the language, these hidden languages or symbolic meaning that we have forgotten how to dance or play. Or even when women will, particularly in flamenco, you work with a fan. There's a whole language of a fan, how you close it and how you open it and what you do and what it's about and how important that is. So, you know, the love affair or the affair as a work of art, think about that, you know, or feel your way through that. What would that look like for you? What would you want? How would your... And I also strongly believe and know, you know, the love affair with parts of yourself. Or the unknown love, who you've never called forth the often. Or now you see, you know, people are writing to their 80-year-olds. I mean, a couple of years ago, I wrote a letter to my 80-year-old, and she wrote back and she said, you know, I'm 80, my bones are strong, my heart's wild, and I don't give a shit. It's like, well, gee, I'd like to meet her right now. So, you know, in this capacity to use the word to evoke, they are prayers to Venus. And, you know, when you see ritual work or prayer work, there's always this repetition, this hypnotic repetition. Well, that also is what happens when you're writing and you're going over stuff, or if you know, the dangerous liaisons. I mean, the love letters that were going back and forth there. I mean, some of it was just out and out vicious, but it's great drama. It's great feeling. So, being able to give yourself, or just sit and read love letters from different worlds and different times and different nations and different people and between different people, and just to get a sense of how profoundly universal this Venusian energy is. And also, I want to recommend a book called The Novel Cure, which is an A to Z of literary remedies. Now, unbeknownst to myself, it's called what is it called? Bibliographic. I've always, you know, for 30 years I've been doing readings, and also I'm also creating this stuff because I'm going to start to create like a mentoring program, and I want to find interesting ways to evoke psyche. So this book, The Novel Cure, it is about, let's say you're depressed, and it will give you a series of novels to read about depression or coming of age or the death of or the awakening of. And so it's really great because I find, certainly in the work and the soul mentor and the work that I do, by suggesting a book, and very often the book is not read at that moment, but they have it. I said, just put it under your pillow. You have it. Your psyche knows it's there. It helps reveal so much and helps, of course, the reading become even richer than it is. So write a letter, see what the love affair in the written word can be for you, or take out some letters from your grandparents or whatever, and just get the sense. Find the Venus. That's the name of the game. Find the Venus in this. She is always present. And sometimes she could be a little dicey, but it's Venus nonetheless. So have a glorious week, and I kind of like talking at 1 o'clock in the morning. Kind of works for me. So, till then, bye-bye.
Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.